Here's something that almost nobody over 60 is being told. There is one food, one specific food that has more clinical evidence behind it for lowering blood pressure and cleaning up arterial stiffness than almost any supplement on the market. It costs almost nothing. You can find it at any grocery store, and there is a very good chance you have been avoiding it because somebody at some point told you it was bad for you. That stops today. In the next 12 minutes, I'm going to show you exactly what is happening inside your arteries after 60, why the advice most people received for decades actually made things worse, and what you can add to your breakfast starting tomorrow morning to start reversing that damage at the cellular level. And I mean that literally at the cellular level. We are going to talk about a specific molecule your body produces, or used to produce more of when you were younger, and how this one food essentially gives your arteries back that ability. Now I want you to stay with me through the middle section of this video because there is a detail in the mechanism, something to do with your morning routine, that almost everyone gets wrong. And if you get that part wrong, none of the rest of it works, so do not skip ahead. Here's what is fascinating. The food I'm going to show you was used in a study at Wake Forest University, participants over 60, 4 weeks. And the results were comparable to what you would expect from a blood pressure medication, a food doing what a drug does. Now, before I show you the food, I need to show you something first, because if you do not understand this part, you are going to go home, add the food to your breakfast, and still wonder why your blood pressure is not moving. The food is not enough on its own. You need to understand what is actually happening in those arteries, and for that, we need to go back about 70 years. Most people believe that fat clogs arteries the way grease clogs a pipe. You eat fat, it coats the inside of your blood vessels, things get narrow, pressure goes up. That is the mental model that most people are walking around with right now, and I understand why. Because that is what we were told for decades by official guidelines, by doctors, by the food industry. Here is why that is not accurate. In the 1950s, a researcher named Ansel Keys published what became known as the 7-country study. It compared fat intake and heart disease rates across different nations and concluded that saturated fat was the primary driver of cardiovascular disease. That study became the foundation of every dietary guideline that followed. Low fat, skim milk, margarine instead of butter, avoid eggs, avoid red meat. Now here is what most people do not know. Keys had data from 22 countries, he published 7. The 15 countries he left out did not fit the pattern. Higher fat intake, lower heart disease, he excluded them. Did you realize that? The entire low-fat era, 50 years of dietary advice, was built on cherry-picked data. That is not a conspiracy theory. That is a documented scientific controversy. Researchers have been writing about it since the 1970s. It just never made it into the conversation most people were having with their doctors. Now fast forward to 2014. The journal Annals of Internal Medicine published a meta-analysis of 72 separate studies involving over 600,000 people across 18 countries. The conclusion was that there was no significant association between saturated fat consumption and cardiovascular events, not even close to what Keys had claimed. So what happened when people followed the low-fat advice? They replaced fat with something. And what they replaced it with was refined carbohydrates, low-fat crackers, low-fat yogurt loaded with sugar, cereals, bread. And here's the problem with that. Refined carbohydrates drive chronic inflammation. And chronic inflammation is what actually damages the inner lining of your arteries, not fat inflammation. The pipe metaphor was always wrong. Your arteries are not pipes. They are living tissue. And living tissue responds to one thing more than anything else, inflammation. So now the real question becomes, what is actually happening to that living tissue after 60? And what does it need to start healing? That is where it gets fascinating. Okay, this is the part I really want you to pay attention to, because this is where the science gets genuinely fascinating. And once you understand this mechanism, everything else, the food, the protocol, even some of the mistakes you might be making in your morning routine right now, all of it clicks into place. Let me introduce you to something called the endothelium. The endothelium. Now, what is that exactly? It is the inner lining of every single blood vessel in your body, every artery, every vein, every capillary. And here's what makes it remarkable. It is only one cell thick, one single layer of cells, like wallpaper on the inside of a pipe, except this wallpaper is alive and it is doing an enormous amount of work. Those cells are not just sitting there, they are producing something your cardiovascular system absolutely depends on. It is called nitric oxide, and nitric oxide is, without exaggeration, one of the most important molecules your body makes. In 1998, the Nobel Prize in Physiology and Medicine was awarded specifically for the discovery of nitric oxide's role in cardiovascular signaling. The Nobel Committee called it one of the most significant findings in cardiovascular medicine in the 20th century. How many people know that? Almost nobody. Now, what does nitric oxide actually do? Think of your arteries like a garden hose. When water pressure gets too high, you need the hose to be flexible enough to expand slightly and absorb that pressure. Nitric oxide is what keeps your arterial walls flexible and relaxed. It signals the smooth muscle around your blood vessels to loosen up, to expand, to let blood flow through without resistance. It is the most powerful natural vasodilator your body produces. When nitric oxide levels are healthy, your arteries expand and contract the way they are supposed to. Blood pressure stays in a normal range. The heart does not have to work as hard. Here's the problem: after the age of 40, nitric oxide production starts to decline. By the time you are 60, research from Nathan Bryan at the University of Texas shows that your endothelial nitric oxide output can be down by as much as 50% compared to when you were in your 20s. 50%. Your arteries are trying to do the same job with half the tools. And this is why blood pressure tends to rise as people get older. Not necessarily because the heart is pumping harder, but because the arteries have lost their flexibility. They have become stiff, rigid, and when you try to push the same volume of blood through a rigid vessel instead of a flexible one, pressure goes up. It is basic physics. So now the question becomes, is there any way to restore that nitric oxide production, or at least compensate for the decline? And the answer is yes. And this is where the food comes in. There is a pathway in your body that most people have never heard of. It is called the nitrate nitric oxide pathway, and it works like this. Certain foods, specific vegetables, are naturally high in dietary nitrates, not the nitrates in processed meat, which is a completely different story. Dietary nitrates from whole plant foods. When you eat those foods, the nitrates get absorbed into your saliva. And here's the fascinating part. You have specific bacteria living in your mouth, on the back of your tongue specifically. And those bacteria convert the nitrates into something called nitrite. The nitrite then gets swallowed, enters your gut, and gets converted again, this time into actual nitric oxide. Usable bioavailable nitric oxide that goes directly into your bloodstream and signals your endothelial cells to relax. Think of it like a manufacturing relay. The food brings the raw material, the bacteria in your mouth do the first stage of processing, your gut does the second, and your arteries receive the finished product. Your body essentially built a backup system for aging endothelium. A way to get nitric oxide into circulation even when the cells that normally make it are not functioning at full capacity anymore. It is pretty wild when you think about it. Now here's sublayer 4. And this is important. This backup pathway, the oral bacteria pathway, becomes more critical the older you get. A 25-year-old has redundancy. Their endothelium is still producing plenty of nitric oxide on its own. They can afford to ignore this pathway. You, after 60, cannot. This is not supplemental for you. For your age group, this pathway is primary. It is doing work that your endothelium used to do and no longer can, which brings me to something that I want you to think very carefully about. And this is the detail I mentioned at the beginning of the video, the one that most people get wrong. Do you use antibacterial mouthwash in the morning? Because if you do, here is what is happening. You rinse, you kill off the bacteria in your mouth, including the very bacteria on the back of your tongue that convert dietary nitrates into nitrite. Then you sit down for breakfast. You eat the most nitrate-rich food on the planet, and nothing happens. The conversion pathway is gone. You neutralized it before it even started. Studies published in the journal Free Radical Biology and Medicine showed that using antibacterial mouthwash twice a day was associated with a measurable increase in blood pressure, specifically because it was disrupting this nitrate conversion pathway. Did you realize this? Most people do not. They are doing everything right with the food and completely undoing it with their morning routine. Now, I am not telling you to stop brushing your teeth. I am not telling you to walk around with bad breath. There are non-antibacterial options. You can use a fluoride-only toothpaste and skip the mouthwash entirely before breakfast, or use it at night instead, a simple shift. But it matters, because you can give your arteries the best raw material in the world. But if you destroy the factory that processes it before the raw material arrives, none of it gets built. Okay, let me give you the numbers now, because I know some of you are sitting there thinking, this sounds interesting, but how strong is the actual evidence? Is this one small study somewhere that nobody replicated? Or is this something that has been looked at seriously by serious researchers in serious journals? Let me show you. Check back in right now, because this is the part most people need to hear. In 2015, researchers at Wake Forest University published a study in the journal Hypertension. They took a group of older adults, people in the demographic we are talking about today, and gave them a daily dose of beet juice, not a drug, not a pharmaceutical intervention, beet juice. And they measured blood pressure before and after, over a period of 4 weeks. The result was an average reduction in systolic blood pressure of 8 millimeters of mercury. Now, let me put that in context for you, because 8 millimeters might not sound dramatic. Most first-line blood pressure medications, the ones prescribed most commonly to people over 60, achieve a reduction of between 5 and 10 millimeters of mercury. That is the clinical benchmark. That is what the drug is designed to do. A food achieving what a drug achieves in 4 weeks. But wait, it gets better. Because this discovery did not start in 2015. The foundational science behind nitric oxide and cardiovascular health goes back much further than most people realize. In 1980, a researcher named Robert Furchtgott discovered that the inner lining of blood vessels, that endothelium we talked about, was producing a mysterious signaling molecule that caused arterial walls to relax. He called it endothelium-derived relaxing factor. He did not know what it was yet. He just knew it existed. It took another 8 years of research before the molecule was identified as nitric oxide, and in 1998, And I want you to really let this land. The Nobel Prize in Physiology and Medicine was awarded to Robert Furchgott, Louis Ignarro, and Farid Murad for that discovery. Not a health influencer, not a podcast guest, Nobel laureates. This is the foundation of what we are talking about today. Now let me give you a comparison that I think will make the food choice very clear. If you look at dietary nitrate content per kilogram of raw vegetable weight, here is what you find. Beet greens, the leafy tops of the beet plant, not just the root, come in at approximately 1,800 milligrams of nitrate per kilogram. Spinach comes in at around 780 milligrams. Arugula at roughly 490 milligrams. Iceberg lettuce, the kind that goes into most American salads by default, sits at about 53 milligrams. Same salad bowl, completely different outcome for your arteries, not even close. And this is why the specific food matters, not just any vegetable, not just any leafy green. The nitrate density varies enormously from one food to the next. And if you are relying on iceberg lettuce to do what beet greens do, you would need to eat approximately 34 times as much. That is not a realistic breakfast. Now here is one more comparison that I think is worth sitting with for a moment. Beet juice. 200 milliliters, which is roughly a small glass, delivers somewhere between 300 and 500 milligrams of dietary nitrate depending on the concentration. The most commonly studied dose of potassium nitrate used in clinical cardiovascular research is 400 milligrams. You are essentially hitting a pharmaceutical research dose from a glass of juice. And here is what is fascinating about that. The nitrate to nitric oxide conversion pathway your body uses does not care whether the nitrate came from a laboratory or a vegetable. The chemistry is identical. Your bacteria do not check the label, they just do the conversion. Nature built this in, you just have to use it. All right, let me give you the protocol. No vagueness here, no eat more vegetables, and see how you feel. I'm going to give you exactly what to do, exactly how to do it, and exactly what to watch out for. Because the details matter in this one, as we just saw, you can get the food completely right and still sabotage the whole thing with one small mistake in your routine. So here's the 30-day arterial reset, only 5 steps. Step 1, the food itself. 1 cup of raw beet greens with breakfast every morning, not the beet root alone, the leafy tops. They have a significantly higher nitrate concentration than the root. If you cannot find beet greens at your grocery store, your first substitute is 200 milliliters of raw beet juice. Cold pressed, not from concentrate. No added sugar. Read the label. A lot of commercial beet juices are heat processed, which degrades the nitrate content significantly. Sealed pressed only. Your second substitute, if neither of those is available, is 2 cups of arugula or 1.5 cups of fresh spinach. Not as potent, but enough to move the needle if you are consistent. 1 cup every morning, non-negotiable. Step 2, the mouthwash rule. Do not use antibacterial mouthwash within 90 minutes before or after eating your beet greens. I know we covered this in the mechanism section, but I want it here in the protocol because this is the mistake that quietly kills the results for a huge number of people. If you want to use mouthwash, use a non-antibacterial fluoride rinse and use it at night instead of the morning. If you oil pull, coconut oil, 1 tablespoon, 10 minutes. That is completely fine and does not disrupt the bacterial pathway. But the standard blue antibacterial mouthwash before breakfast is working directly against everything you are trying to do. Step 3, the pairing. At the same meal, add a whole food source of vitamin C. Half a lemon squeezed into a glass of water, a handful of strawberries, a few slices of kiwi. Now, what is the vitamin C doing here? There is a molecule in your body called tetrahydrobiopterin, BH4 for short. Think of it as the maintenance crew for your nitric oxide synthase enzyme, the enzyme your endothelial cells use to produce nitric oxide directly. Vitamin C regenerates BH4. Without enough vitamin C, that enzyme starts producing free radicals instead of nitric oxide. You actually get the opposite of what you want. The endothelium runs hot, oxidative stress increases, and arterial damage accelerates. So the beet greens bring the dietary nitrate through the oral pathway. The vitamin C keeps the endothelial pathway functioning correctly at the same time. You are working both systems simultaneously. That is the combination that produces the results you saw in the clinical data. Half a lemon in water, that is all it takes. Step 4, the heat rule. Do not cook your beet greens at high heat. Dietary nitrates are relatively stable at low temperatures, but begin degrading significantly above around 120 degrees Celsius. If you want to cook them, light steaming is acceptable. 2 to 3 minutes maximum. Sautéed briefly in olive oil is fine. Roasted at high heat for an extended period is not. Raw is always the most potent option. If you are adding them to a smoothie, to a salad, or eating them as they are with a little lemon and olive oil, you are preserving the full nitrate content. And yes, I am aware that raw beet greens have a slightly bitter, earthy taste. Some people love it, some people do not. If you are in the second group, blend them into a smoothie with some berries and a banana. You will not taste them. The nitrates do not care how you consume them as long as you consume them raw or close to it. Step 5, the measurement. Before you start this protocol, take your blood pressure, write it down, date it, take it again at day 14, take it again at day 30. Use a home blood pressure monitor. They are inexpensive and widely available. Take 3 readings on the same arm, 2 minutes apart in the morning before eating, and average them. That is your number. I want you to have data, not a feeling, not a guess. Actual before and after numbers that you can look at and evaluate for yourself. Because here is the thing, I can show you the Wake Forest study, I can show you the Nobel Prize science, I can walk you through every layer of the mechanism. But at the end of the day, the most convincing data you will ever see is your own. Your body, your arteries, your numbers 4 weeks apart. Prove it to yourself. Try this for 30 days. Take your blood pressure before you start and after, and come back and tell me what happened. All right, that is the full picture. You now know something that most people sitting in a doctor's waiting room right now do not know. You know what is actually happening to the endothelium after 60? You know why nitric oxide production declines and what that does to arterial flexibility? You know the oral bacteria pathway, why it becomes your primary system as you age, and the one morning habit that quietly shuts it down before it even gets started. And you have a 5-step protocol you can begin tomorrow morning with something that costs a few dollars at any grocery store. That is not a small thing. That is 30 years of clinical nutrition research distilled into one breakfast. Now I want to ask you something. Come back in 30 days and tell me your numbers in the comments below. Systolic before, systolic after. That is all I need. You do not have to write an essay, just the numbers. Because when other people who are watching this video see real results from real people in their age group, that is more powerful than anything I can say from behind this camera. Become part of the evidence. I read those comments, every one of them matters. And if this video gave you something useful today, share it with someone over 60 who is managing their blood pressure right now. Not because I'm asking you to grow a channel, because that person in your life deserves to have this information. The 7-minute doctor's appointment was never going to cover it. That is why we are here. And take this opportunity to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. I'm Andrew Collins, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.